Hi, welcome to the Modern Romantic Podcast, where we celebrate romanticism by featuring amazing people doing fabulous things. I'm Emily, I'm your host today, and Trey is not with us. He's with us in spirit, but he is at rehearsal for his holiday play performance in Charlotte, North Carolina. We're covering for him today, and we wish him the best at his really long rehearsal day. So we can't wait to have him back. But today I am with an amazing costumer, embroiderer, and artist named Twan Lentjes.
That's
And
okay.
I am so excited to talk to you because we have similar backgrounds and some things in common. And I have loved the work you've done. So welcome to the show,
Thank you.
Twan.
Thank you. Nice to be here. Thank you for having me.
Of course. Yeah. Thank you. Um, of course, your most recent credit is Wicked, which is the movie, which is awesome. And I have so many friends that have seen it and are saying such great things about it. So I'm going to start right away by just encouraging our whole audience to go
Sorry,
watch this movie.
oh,
Um,
sorry, the connection from my side. It said the connection was lost, but I
oh, I
think I'm
still
back.
see and hear you
Oh,
just fine.
sorry.
That's okay. Yeah, if it happens again, let me know. We're good.
Yeah,
Can you see me and hear me okay?
yeah, it's
Okay.
good now.
Okay. I didn't bump something. Okay. So yeah, I want to encourage everybody to go see it because it's an amazing story and it's so well done. And I don't want to spoil anything, so we will just leave that be. And but I do want to talk about you and your journey and all of the other work you've done and how you got here. So what got you here? Like how did you start doing costuming and embroidery?
So, when I was little, my mum used to make us costumes because we have this celebration called Carnival, which is like a Christian thing before Lent
Okay.
starts. Yeah, it's at the beginning of Lent. Trying to remember. I'm not very religious, so I can't remember anymore. But anyway, you can dress up as whatever. So my mum used to sew us costumes, and I got really interested in making costumes as well. And then I had Barbie dolls, so I used to create little things for my Barbies. Um, yeah, that was until like I can't remember how old I was, but like I always was interested in sewing and costume. And I wanted to go to fashion school when I was little, but then due to bullying and stuff, I decided it would be better to do something more mainstream.
Mm.
um, so I left that bit out of my life for a while. And then as I joined a musical theatre group once I moved to London, we used to provide our own costumes. And in the first year, I didn't have a sewing machine yet, but then I was going to play a priest in The Witches of Eastwick, the next show we did. And I was like, I need to find a good priest costume, but couldn't find it or not cheap enough. So I was like, you know what? I'm going to buy a sewing machine and I'll make it myself. And it started with making a few pieces. And then for the next show, I did a few more things. And then eventually, in 2015, we did Sleeping Beauty. Like it's a pantomime, it's a traditional British thing. So it's a kid show basically, but there's lots of audience participation. Um, and I made with help, but I sourced fabrics, created patterns and everything for 70 cast members in three
Wow.
months next to a
Wow.
full-time job. So
Wow.
that was a mammoth task. Um,
That
that
is
was absolutely
huge.
insane. Yeah, it was. And because of that, and the year before we did Aladdin,
Hmm.
people were pushing me like you should do more with this. Also, the director Pippa, she was like, "Twan, you need to do more with this." And a really good friend who sadly passed away, she was always an advocate for me to do more with that part of my life. So then I started applying to well, I actually only applied to two schools. One was RADA, which was a shorter course for costume supervising, and you would learn how to make costumes as well. But I got to the spare list. So I was like, oh, what do I do next? And then I applied to Wimbledon the year after, and I got accepted. And yeah, then I started my costume career. And the embroidery bit, I didn't know it was a thing, but then on the costume networking group, I found out about digital embroidery through So Steam. She does a lot of digital embroidery, and that made me realize um, I might be able to do something like that as well. Because I really, really, really wanted to create. It's called a habit à la française. It's like from the 18th century France and early 19th century, but a fully embroidered suit. And we had to
Cool.
create something that was based on real life. So for me, that was like there was no other option for me basically to create that suit. I researched digital embroidery and then hired a machine because we didn't have one at uni. And then thankfully I got to use the software, the Wilcom embroidery software for free for like the 3 months I needed it. So I learned how to do digital embroidery, and then I got a bursary for that and to buy the actual software through a designer called Christopher Oram, who people might know has designed Frozen the musical.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and then a friend of my housemate at the time, she was a supervisor at the Royal Opera, and she was like, "I want you to create a waistcoat for my next show." And that was my first official piece of embroidery I did. And then from there, after COVID, because that was all before COVID, we had a little
Yeah.
break with work
Mm-hmm.
for COVID, and then yeah, it literally just kicked off. It was crazy how much I've done in this short amount of time. It's been, yeah, really unbelievable.
It has. I looked at your resume and it is impressive and compact.
Yeah, thank you.
It is, yeah. Um, and it's interesting how you went from like theater productions into film too. And I was wondering, for there's I have so many questions, so many. We're going to be here for 4 hours. I'm going to try
That's
not
fine.
to. So back to the when you started embroidering. So you actually there's more to embroidery than just sewing, and I think I just want our
Mm,
audience to understand that because you're taking designs and you're actually digitizing them for the machine to
yeah,
sew. So
yeah,
you not only had to learn how to run a machine that would sew it, but you had to learn how to digitize those designs. Am I right?
yeah, yeah. It
Okay.
was so there was a software you could use for 30 days for free. So I tried that out, did the trial, and I was like, okay, I think I will be able to get this because even back in the day, like whenever there was a computer program to learn, um, often I was quite like it was quite easy for me to sort of understand how it would work. And it kind of works like Illustrator. So you draw the shapes and then the program, you can choose different fills. So you can have like satin stitches, which are just straight lines, or you can have tatami fill, which is like all these shorter stitches that sort of like sit into each other. Um, and then you can add the directions you want on the stitching and things. So there's a lot that happens, like you draw what you want and then you fill it in however you want it, but then you also have to consider how it stitches out on the machine because it's all about testing as well. My first thing I ran on the machine was absolutely horrible because I didn't have the understanding of how to make it run smooth,
Sure.
because at that time I was like copying pasting all these little things in a row, and I was like, oh, I'm sure the machine will understand that they can just sew it like one after the other. No, it didn't. You had to like properly like say you need to stitch this, go there, stitch that, go there, stitch that. So after I did my first run, I went to Facebook again to a different group, and I was like, how do I make this run smooth? So I did have some help as well with how to make it run. Um, and thankfully, like the suit I wanted to recreate that had been worn by a Dutch person, and I'm Dutch originally. So for me, when I found that suit, I was like, oh, it's really nice. But then I was like, I have to make this one. So I contacted the museum about better pictures because it was only like a blurry picture and more information. And then when they couldn't send me any other photos, but they sent me some information, and it's crazy that this person in 1970 got this suit, and he was the stable master for uh, Willem the fifth or third, I can't remember now, but the current king at the time or prince. And then he became the mayor of the town where I was born.
Oh,
So for me, that connection was like, I have to do this one
yeah.
specifically. And then through a lot of Googling, I found like a really high definition photo of the actual suit. So then I was able to sort of recreate like stitch by stitch, more or less,
Wow.
what the actual suit looked like. Not the fabric, sadly, because that was a bit trickier. The fabrics were quite different at the time. Um, but I made it work, and yeah, I got a lot of people looking at it. Even one person from accounts, she came often and was like, "Is the machine running?" So it was really exciting to be able to do something like that at uni. And it's the place to try things out because if you're getting paid to do a certain job, you need to know what you're doing most of the time. There's still a lot of room for experimentation, but not as much as when you're at uni. So for me, it was like, I need to do this now because if I fail, it's fine. Like that is a part of the process, but I can't
Right.
fail in like professional life like that.
Right. Wow. That's that's really cool that you actually were able to finish that and make it come to life again. Do
Mm,
you ever embroider anything for yourself? Like, like a
yeah.
jacket you're wearing? Yeah. Yeah, like you should.
So not much, because usually when I'm working, it's quite difficult to fit things in. And I don't know if you're doing something as a hobby, it's like, oh yeah, I'll spend all my free time doing my hobby. But when you're working like 50 to 60 hours a week, um, kind of my weekends are sacred to me to more or less do no work,
Yeah.
even if it's for myself. But like I'm a massive fan of the Scream films, so when Scream 6 was released, I made a hoodie with the mask on there, like glow in the dark as the original mask glows in the dark. For
Awesome.
Little Mermaid that I worked on, I made a t-shirt with like a mermaid. Um, and then for Pride, 2 years ago I started with this, but I couldn't get the whole outfit done. But I made myself a habit à la française, which I finished this year because due to the film strikes, there was no work, so I had all
Oh,
the
right.
time in the world to do stuff. But yeah, I made a whole velvet coat this year, which took like a month and a half, I think, to make.
Wow.
But yeah, fully embroidered, and it's weird. And I'm not saying this because I made it, but the way I felt in those clothes, I've never felt like that before. And it's so strange to get a feeling like if you put something on to your body that you like it changes your mindset sort of about clothing and how it makes you feel. Like now I'm just wearing like I feel fine in it, but in that like I don't know, it just yeah, a feeling I've never had before in any other costume.
I think that's important too because when you think about designing for someone else, you kind of understand what they go through as well then when they're
Mm,
putting on what you made, whether
yeah.
they're acting or, going to a party or walking the street. They're that transformation is very real, and the I think the fact that now you can identify with that and you understand it, I think that's
Mm.
important. I feel like
Oh yeah.
that connection to who you made it for as well.
Yeah, and every body shape is different. People feel different in certain clothing. Even when I was making stuff for the shows I was in, um, like now I understand much more about it after going to uni and working in the industry. But it's a collaboration, especially in film more so than in theater. I think in theater, usually, especially when it's a long running show, the designs are set, so you can't change anything. But people still need to feel good in what they're wearing. Like um, even if it's the same costume, they might have a different neckline. You see it a lot, and it's a good example, I think, Chicago. I've never worked on the show, but I've seen many versions of the same show. Roxy and Velma often have different styles of the same costume, depending on the actress, depending on their body shape. So, yeah, it's always a collaboration with the person who actually needs to wear the clothes as well to make sure that they feel comfortable in them and can do whatever they need to do. Like on stage, there's maybe need to dance or they need to be able to sing or whatever in their costume. And in film, it's the same. Depending on what they need to do, they need to be
Hmm.
able to do it well in their costume.
Right. It
Yeah,
needs to function on top of being
yeah,
looking the part and telling that
yeah,
story. Yeah.
yeah.
So going from like theater to film with your career, what like if you can think back to when you first got your first film job, and how was that different? Like all of a sudden you're in a different world of costuming, and what differences are there?
Um, I think the the timing maybe might be different. So my first
Mm-hmm.
film job I got when I was in my second year, and we had to do a work experience. And um, three of us from uni were able to work on Doctor Dolittle with Jenny Bevan, who designed the film. Um, and we were working in it's called crowd embellishment. So basically, you get costumes. Usually, you don't make a lot. Sometimes in the beginning, but especially on this one, we decorated costumes to fit the brief. Um, and that really was my first introduction to film. Um, and before that, I worked basically since the start of uni. I was lucky enough to meet someone called Jamie Attle, who does a lot of theatre work and pantomimes as well. And I think sort of film can be a little bit more time pressured, I think. Like
Mm-hmm.
often there's less time to do stuff. Um, but also for a stage show, a costume needs to be able to be worn 8 times a week, go through all sorts of different things, as where a film costume might just need to be used a few times for that certain shot. So you can use different fabrics, like the construction can be, um, it still needs to be perfect, but it doesn't need to last as long. So there's a different quality, usually in the fabrics as well. Um, but other than that, I would say like the sewing is the same. Like stage costumes often still have a lot of detail. I mean, especially looking at the Wicked musical, like if you see how much detail there is in those costumes, it's incredible. You
Mm-hmm.
don't have that with every single show, but you still need the detail, and I think that's the same for film. You still want a lot of detail in the costumes to bring them to life because you especially in film you have such close-ups. You really need
Mm-hmm.
to be able to see what is there.
Mm-hmm.
But in yeah, I think mostly it's kind of the same process. You get a design or you get like mood boards, and then you create something from that together with the designer.
For sure. I think especially with higher resolution video now, I feel like we are looking at details of costumes differently than we did before.
Mm,
I remember when the movie The Great Gatsby came out with Leonardo DiCaprio, and I remember how it was filmed in such a way to take moments to focus on those costumes and those little, like the clip in her hair and the little bit of the lapel and the lapel pin he wore and the tie bar. I remember little details like that because it was intentional in how they filmed it, but
mm,
also the detail was paid attention to by the costuming department. And I just
yeah,
thought that movie was brilliant for that. Also, because I have a costuming brain. So to
yeah,
me, I was applauding that. I was like,
yeah,
finally, the costumes get their day. And but I think about that with like 4K and 8K video and how we can see these tiny details now, and people are mimicking that in their own fashion, but also in like everyone wants to dress up as characters from these beloved films, and when you see somebody dressing up like Queen Charlotte, for instance, and going to maybe a Comic Con or some event, even Halloween, we're looking
Mm.
at those details to recreate them. And so I think it gets, because we're zooming in on these things now, we have that ability, because otherwise we didn't have access to see them up close. I was I lost my train of thought on that one. I had another question about it and I lost it. There was something you said about the detail, but anyway, when you I had a conversation with Michelle Carriger once, another embroiderer,
Mm.
and not on the podcast yet, maybe one day. Um, she was telling me about how what a lot of people don't realize, especially for like television, is the audience doesn't realize that sometimes with last minute changes to a design or to a shot, there you're under the time pressure that's like,
Mm.
okay, now we're going to shoot her from the front instead of the back or whatever, and now you have to make sure this collar has a certain detail and go, and so you're rushing at the last second to make this look right.
Mm.
Do you experience some of that too?
Um, I mean, I think it's different because I mainly do digital embroidery. So
Sure.
what I do is usually work on flat pieces of fabric before they're
Okay.
cut up.
I
So
see.
for me to add stuff afterwards usually doesn't happen. So I'm
Okay.
quite lucky in that sense. Um, but yeah, there's always moments where there's time pressure. Like I think that's quite normal, but it's in every single job, isn't it? Like end of the month accounts or whatever in an accounting job.
Mm-hmm.
Um, like the same in film, sometimes things get swapped around and you just have to make it work. Yeah, it happens. But I also wanted to add something on to talking about detail. Just before I went to uni, I went to a chat with John Bright, and there were some other designers, but it was really interesting to see what they got away with in, I can't remember if it was the 70s or 80s, but because of the quality of film was so low, or so much lower than we have now. But
Yeah.
like basically, it was for King Henry VIII and his six wives. Um, but like they showed close-ups of the chains and stuff they made, which on the film looked amazing, but it was all like little hardware rings from the hardware shop and stuff like that. They could get away with those things back in the day. Nowadays, you would never
Right.
be able to do such things. So that is really interesting how it changed and how everything needs to be absolutely perfect, because we have such high
Mm-hmm.
resolutions. And I've done it myself, like because I'm such a massive fan of Wicked, for a party with the musical theatre group I was in, the theme was to come as a character you would never be able to play. So I was like, well, what male role is fun in that sense, and which one could I never play? It's like, you know what, I'm gonna dress as Elphaba. So I
Oh.
had been researched, like I did a full Elphaba second act look. But like you said, I've been looking at hundreds of pictures, whatever I could find online.
Mm-hmm.
Um, all of them are different because each time they make one, they put separate pieces of fabric together to create the different fabrics, and the skirt as well. Like it's all different. Every skirt is unique, but
Yeah.
there were certain things I could find in every single one of those costumes that was the same. Um, and also the beading pattern was more or less the same. So I did the same when I made that as a cosplay costume, basically, like researching and trying to find the best pictures to see every single detail as well. And um, it's quite fun to try and recreate something as well.
Yeah. I think
And
so.
now, yeah, and now especially with Comic Con and things like that, it's like everyone tries to usually like make the most amazing things, and it's really amazing what people can do.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. For sure. Yeah. I was thinking about how movies have and film has influenced fashion as well.
Mm.
And one thing that came to mind was how I don't know, even like even some some of our major retailers here in the U.S. have adopted film into their design. Like they'll come out with a line that's based on this film or this movie. I remember there were a couple of them that came out with Outlander themed like sweaters and things like that. Or
Mm.
I'm trying to think of all the items, but even accessories and things like that, or even even independent clothing lines coming out with their own versions of the fabrics and things like that. And I kind of love how film influences fashion beyond just cosplay or beyond just
Mm.
costumes. And I wondered if, because I'm starting to also see, and maybe it's just I haven't been exposed to it, but I'm starting to see more embroidery in
Mm.
film. At least I feel like I am. And maybe it's because we're doing different things or better things with costuming as far as how we're decorating it. And but I wonder if embroidery now will work its way more into fashion in a bigger sense than it has in the past.
Yeah, because the funny thing is when I speak to people, it's like, oh, embroidery. How does that work? And then I sort of explain the process, but then I'm like, surely you've got something in the closet or in your wardrobe, in your clothing. Like you must have more than one piece that has embroidery on it because we all do, even without
Mm-hmm.
realizing. I don't think, no, not on this.
Except today.
Um, oh no, I do.
Oh, you do? A
Yeah,
little
that's
Tommy
embroidered.
Hilfiger logo.
Yeah,
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
it's like all these logos are very often embroidered,
Mm-hmm.
and it might not be like a fully intricate design, but especially logos or on caps, like basically every single cap has embroidery on
Right.
it. Yeah, and we I don't know why, but often we don't realize that that is embroidery, or it somehow doesn't. Maybe because the embroidery we do a lot. I mean, sometimes I do logos as well for a film, but often what we do is more unusual stuff. So I think people just clock onto it more. That
Mm.
it's like, oh, it's embroidery, but it's not a logo. Um,
Right.
but
Even
yeah,
patches, like a patch on a
yeah,
sleeve or like military stuff,
oh yeah,
things like that. Patches are embroidered.
yeah. And I think that's been around quite a long time, but now we see more intricate stuff, and also with new inventions, or it's cheaper to produce. The sequin jumpers, for example, we didn't see sequin jumpers like maybe 5 years ago, and now you see them everywhere with the
Mm-hmm.
reversible sequins and stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Because technology to do that has changed.
Right.
Um, so yeah, I guess that's why we see it more as well.
Right, because once upon a time we were hand sewing every single sequin onto
Yeah.
things instead
Yep.
of a machine doing it.
Yeah. They didn't have machines before 1860, I think it
Oh
is. I
yeah.
can't remember the exact date, but yeah, everything was hand sewn.
Mm-hmm. And
Yeah.
there was the picture you sent in for us to promote this episode was so cool. It had on your
Mm.
fingers you had spools of thread in different colors, and I loved that picture so much. And I thought about how a lot of that embroidery thread is um, shiny,
Hmm.
and I wondered if you have not like matte finish or I don't know what it I don't know this world, so like if it's historical, does the shininess affect how it films?
So I think that particular thread is a rayon, which
Okay.
sort of imitates silk. So it really gives a nice sheen to the thread. If you look at polyester thread, that's like really shiny. You have
Mm.
matte polyesters as well. So
Okay.
and you've got wool threads, cotton threads, metallic, different
Okay.
styles of metallic as well. So you've got really shiny metallic, or yeah, the possibilities are quite endless. So whatever
Okay.
you need for like your goal. But I think that kind of shiny thread, which is called classic thread from Madeira, is what I use most.
Okay.
Um, because I think it depends on the lighting as well, but it's not too shiny. I might actually. I should have
Do you have
it
some there?
somewhere. Oh
Ooh.
yeah, here it is.
Of course, you're just
It's a,
surrounded by
it's
embroidery.
it's the sample card. I've got a new
Oh,
one,
okay.
so but yeah,
Oh,
like
I
you
can
can see,
see.
it's
Oh, look at
that's
all that.
and these
Okay.
that's just basically one color chart.
That's okay.
um,
That's just more than I thought would.
but
I don't,
yeah,
yeah, like I said, I'm not in that world. That's amazing you get such a palette to choose from.
yeah, and they like if I
I
hold
see the
it closer to
reflection.
the light, you get more of a reflection. But for Queen Charlotte, I did one dress because time was of the essence. It was literally one thread color. But because of the way the pattern flowed, you get all these different, is it called refractions of light?
Sure.
So it looks like multiple colors of thread, but actually it was just one thread.
Oh,
But yeah, because if you stitch that way or that way, the light
right.
reflects differently on the thread. So yeah, there's a lot of manipulation you can do.
Right. Another digitizing trick you can do to create the art to look how you want.
Yeah,
That's cool. I didn't think about it that way. Of course,
yeah.
that makes sense. Do you do you have any projects in your head that you want to make for yourself or otherwise that you're like, oh, I want to design, or do you look at the world through that lens, like, oh, I could design that myself?
Um, no, I have one project in my mind which I think is never going to happen now, um,
Oh,
which is fine. It's just a lot of work and a lot of like I just don't have the time because I wouldn't like it would be in my own time.
sure.
Um, but there's this thing called World of Wearable Art,
Oh,
and you
yes, I'm
can yeah,
familiar with that.
and they make the most amazing things for that. And I created something in my first year at uni which I absolutely didn't like.
Oh,
I liked the idea of what I did, but I didn't like the execution, which was a design. Um, but I made like paper cutouts from this object from the V&A museum here
okay.
because the brief was to choose two objects from the museum and then create a costume with it. So I kind of made like an Elizabethan looking uh, costume with like a metal sort of, or was it a I keep is it wrath iron?
Wrought
I can't,
iron?
yeah, sorry, I
Okay.
keep forgetting how to say the
That's
word.
okay.
Um, but I had all these really intricate swirls and sort of like a little window, and I was like, oh, this is so cool. So I made that design, and now I kind of want to realize that in a full embroidered version.
Ooh.
So make embroidered panels and then like connect them in the same way as I did on that design. But I don't think I'll ever have the time to do it. And it's a lot of thread that I would need for it as well, because it covers a lot of embroidery.
Wow. That's
um,
amazing. The world of wearable art, for anybody who's listening, is just go look at go Google it because it
yeah,
is jaw-dropping wearable art, and
yeah,
it's I can't even describe it. And every year it's different, and every year it's amazing. And yeah, yeah, I considered submitting something many years ago to them, and the parameters because I think it's in Australia. Is that right? Yeah,
is it New Zealand
or
or
maybe New
Australia?
Zealand.
I can't. Yeah, one
Oh,
of them.
maybe it is New Zealand. Either way, it is
Yeah,
not on this continent
no,
or
it's far
yours.
away.
Right. So the parameters to ship it were like that alone is a project.
Yeah,
So I didn't, I was a little daunted by that. But I, it, yeah, I think if you have some way to do it, I think you should. I would applaud all of that. I would cheer you on because
yeah,
I think it
maybe
would be so neat.
in some future. I don't know.
The time, though, I can't imagine the work that gets put into some of those designs. They're just
Yeah.
outrageous and awesome.
I mean, to give you an example, my Pride costume, fully made. I'm not counting the shirt, which is mostly hand sewn, but I did that at uni because I didn't have time to make myself a new one. Um, but basically, the breeches, the waistcoat, and the coat, probably including creating all the digital files for the embroidery, and then doing the embroidery, probably took about 2 months, if not more.
Okay.
So it's like
Wow.
it's a long project, especially when you do everything yourself. Of course, when you work in a workroom on film or theater, like you do your bit and then other people do their bit. So it's slightly different. But when you have to do everything yourself, it can take up a lot of time.
Of course.
Yeah.
Yes. Well, yeah, because you're creating the garment and doing all of the embroidery and decoration in
Yeah.
it. Do you ever incorporate other elements, or you like? Do you just do embroidery, or do you maybe for your own things? But like, if you're doing a project um, for film or theater or something, do you also add other things um, like uh, like a crystal or beadwork or
Hmm.
anything like that?
So yeah, now I have a machine that can do beading and sequence as well, but not to the extent
Cool.
um, that you can do by hand. So for Queen Charlotte, for example, her main wedding dress, or her fancy wedding dress, as we call it, I think, because she has two.
Right.
But the main one that's on the promotional images as well. So I did a base layer of digital embroidery, and then Hattie McGill and Beth Perry, they were the hand embroiderers and embellishers. So they added sequins by hand, beads,
Okay.
stones, like thousands of stones to make it sparkle and everything. So it depends a bit on the project. On Wicked, it was the same. So I did the base layer of embroidery, and then they were there as well, and some other people. So it really depends on the project. I've done a short course in hand embroidery, like mostly beading and gold work and things, but it's not my expertise. So I'd rather let someone who knows exactly what they're doing do that, and then I'll just do my bit. But yeah, um, for the project at uni, the only thing I added by hand was the French knots. So there's all the little tiny
Oh yeah.
dots. For the people who don't know, you sort of wrap the thread around the needle and then pull it through, and then you get it like a little tiny knot. So those I did by hand because I didn't find a way to do that by machine. I was like, um, I was we had to choose if it was like a museum quality piece or a film piece, and I was like, well, if it's for film, you still want that detail of that French not to be done by hand, so I chose to do those by hand.
Wow.
um so think little things like that, and maybe some beading and stuff, but yeah, I usually just stick to the digital
Okay.
side of things.
I didn't think there was a machine that would do some of that real, because
Mm,
it's kind of like a bead here, a bead there sometimes with embellishment. And so I didn't know that there was a machine would do it. So maybe you would have, it's better to hand do some of those things. But you
yeah,
said
it's
you,
like if it's sporadic beats, then definitely by hand. But like a lot of the fabrics that have like all over beading and sequins, there's machines quite jealous of those actually, but I can do like four
hmm
different sequins and multiple different beads, and it just literally sews it on all automatically. Like I found this one video on Instagram, and I'm just like, oh wow, this is so cool. And then
I
you get
must
more and
see
more of
this.
them. Yeah, it's really mesmerizing. And these machines, these embroidery machines, are like they can do like 15, 20 meters of fabric at the same time. So they're huge machines. But that's like the beaded fabrics you find in fabric shops, who do all of that kind of work. Yeah.
I remember making an Elizabethan dress many years ago, and I wanted to put, I put pearls in the along the pattern of the underskirt. So it was kind
Mm.
of this, I don't remember, but there was this pattern on the underskirt, and I used thousands of pearls, and I hand sewed each one on, and I spent like all night doing it, and I watched movies while I was
Yeah.
sitting hand sewing on the couch. And the whole time I'm thinking, there has to be a machine that does this. There has to be a machine that does. How do they do this everywhere else?
Yeah.
And I mean, technology's come a long way since then, but I'm so happy that it exists. I can't even fathom how a machine would sew that on. I want to see a video.
I do have, I don't think I have any. Trying to think. I think maybe in my How I Made My Pride outfit, there might be like a short video of sequins because I have sequins on there as well. I'm sure I included that. I can't
I'll look
remember.
through your videos then
Um,
and see. Yeah.
yeah, but for the beats, it's really interesting. It goes down on a, you know, the beat spinners where you can like, it has
Catch
like
a
a
bunch of them.
needle, yeah, and it sort of spins around. That's basically what it does. So the little pots on top spin round, and then the beads are strung onto a wire that goes down, and there's like these little tiny teeth that sort of push it out as the needle goes in. It's really interesting.
Wow.
Yeah,
How exciting though that that exists.
yeah, it's very mesmerizing when you first get the machine. It's like, oh wow, yeah,
Yeah, I feel like there's a little bit of fear that it could break a bead or, it
yeah,
feels so precise and so delicate.
yeah.
So,
It's yeah, you have to set the machine very specific. Um, Especially when I move the machine, I take those uh, elements off the machine. So when I put them back on, I have to like go through the whole setup and test exactly that the sequin and the beats like exactly are in the right place. So
yeah.
there's a bit of work involved in
Mm-hmm.
making it work.
I bet. Um, so what you your Wicked is fresh. It is out in theaters right now as I speak. Um, you have there's and just for everybody to know, there are two parts to Wicked, part one and part two.
Yeah.
So there's another film coming. Um, are you looking forward to other projects as well? Like Wicked is done; they filmed it all at the same time. Am I right? So
Yeah.
they're done filming. So you have upcoming projects. Do you have anything? I realize you probably can't talk about it, but are you looking forward to your next project?
Yeah, I'm currently on a project, so
Okay,
that's
good.
exciting. Yes,
Yes,
thankfully, because it's been quiet for such a long time. But I'm very happy and lucky that I'm working
good.
again. Um, yeah, and I'm doing making and embroidery, so that's nice as well. So I get to do a bit of both.
Oh, good.
So yeah, it's very exciting.
That is exciting. Do
Yeah.
you have a dream project that you would love to do? Like money was no object and
Oof.
the right person came along and said, "Let's do this. We'll pay you whatever you require."
I think it sounds really stupid, but I've done my dream project.
Oh no, I love
um,
that.
so Little Mermaid was one of them. Like as
Yeah.
soon as they announced it, because it's one of my favorite Disney films, I was like, I have to work on this film. I don't care if I'm just bringing coffee round. I want to work on this film.
Oh, that's so great.
Um, but then I got thanks to Alessio O'Driscoll, the cutter who I was working with after the pandemic. She got onto that job and she was like, I'll take you with me if I can. And then she could. And then they found out about the embroidery. So then I was able to embroider her wedding dress as well. So for me, that was like one of my dream
That's
projects.
awesome.
And spent some time in Sardinia as well with the film. And then Wicked was one of the other ones. And in between, I was also able to work on Wednesday Addams for Netflix. And I love the Addams family. So for me, I've always wanted to work on something professional, Addams family related. Um, so yeah, it's weird. Like I praise myself so lucky that I've been able to work on these projects. So at the moment, I I don't know. I think until they announce new projects that are something like that, I yeah, it's weird. I can't think of anything at the moment that I'm like, oh, that maybe I don't know if they're still making it, but maybe something like Hunchback of Notre Dame. That would be something for me, I think, really interesting to do embroidery on as well. Um, yeah, or maybe like insanely huge fantasy film that I don't know of yet.
Right.
But something, yeah,
You never
I don't
know.
know. Yeah,
You have had such cool success in the project you've been able to be part of, and so I could see how you've had a dream project come true already. That didn't surprise me.
yeah.
In fact, I wondered if that was true before I asked it. Like, oh, maybe. Um, So I think that's awesome. Not everybody gets to realize a dream project. So I'm so glad that you got to.
Yeah.
Sandra in our chat, our producer Sandra said, "Oh my gosh, the blue bubble dress in the Little Mermaid was gorgeous, and she loved Wednesday as well." What did
Oh.
you What did you do on Wednesday?
So I mainly worked on Wednesday's costumes and then also some of Morticia.
Okay,
Um, it's very much a team, like in some workrooms in America, I know like the cutter cuts everything and then one maker makes the whole garment from top to bottom, basically. But often we work on segments or different elements and then put it all together. Um, but yeah, a few. I mostly, and they took quite long to make, but the school skirts was one of the main things for
okay,
Wednesday. Her iconic dress we started with. Um, the coat she wears in the beginning as well, and the
okay.
Goody Adams costume, so the white one and the brown and red one, and then Morticia's costumes. Trying to her raven ball gown because or like
Oh,
it's a skirt and a bodice, but so there was one original, but we needed duplicates um for the I don't know. I mean, it's been out for so long, but when the blood pours down and things like that,
right.
running through the
Yeah.
forest. So yeah, things like that. It was really, really cool. Yeah.
Do you ever get to keep anything you've done for?
No,
I didn't think so.
I have a few samples of what I've worked on, but
Sure.
yeah, we were not allowed to keep things. No, it's all
That
yeah,
makes
it's quite a
sense.
shame sometimes, but yeah, usually it's like all the half of the time I make samples and I give the samples to someone and I never see them back.
Mm,
Or sometimes they come back with like, oh, this is what we want. But yeah, often yeah,
that's
things
too bad.
go away from from your area. You never see it again.
Right. Well, yeah, it becomes part of a bigger project on a
Yeah.
costume, and then yeah, I get it. I just thought maybe it'd be cool if maybe one day,
Yeah.
maybe one day.
No, if I could, I would have had my whole house full of things.
Of course. And then I saw on IMDb that you also worked on Andor, and I saw that and I thought it was pretty cool. I really enjoyed that show, but it shows you as uncredited. So what did you
Yeah,
do on
because
Andor?
I literally it was so funny because I started working on it with Jeff, who I've worked with on Cruella as well,
Okay.
and um, so that was for about 4 weeks, and then it turned into five. But during the fifth week, I got the call to come and work on Little Mermaid, so I actually had to leave the job slightly
Oh,
early. But he was fine with it. He was like, "How long is it going to be for?" Because in film, sometimes when you're on a project, you get a call for something else, and obviously you need to talk to the person you're working with at the time. But uh, if you get an opportunity to go on such a big project, and usually, depending on what you do on your current job, but yeah, sometimes they're fine with you going to the other project. So yeah, I worked in crowd, so like making lots of accessories and costumes for the crowd
okay.
scenes. Yeah,
Neat. And I'll have to watch
yeah,
that again and take
and I
better
did a
note.
tiny bit of embroidery. The school girls have like a yeah, like a little bit of embroidery, which I did as well.
Okay. Yeah, I'm going to have to watch that again.
Yeah.
Neat.
So yeah.
Okay. Well, I'd like to. Trey always asks this question, and since he's not here today, I will ask it for him because it's one he always likes to ask, and that is if you could have lunch with anyone on Earth, alive or dead, who would you choose?
Oh, wow. Hmm.
No pressure.
Yeah, it's a difficult question. There's so many people who I want
Right?
to have
It's hard
lunch
to
with.
choose one.
Yeah. Um, I think maybe Adrian, who designed The Wizard of Oz and a lot of other amazing films from that era.
Mm.
Just like I think Hollywood at that time was so interesting with like they had spent a lot of money on costume as well, like beaded gowns and things like that. So maybe, yeah, maybe him, pick his brain.
That would be cool.
Yeah.
That's a good one.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Or maybe even Marilyn Monroe. That would be really cool as well.
Mm. It would.
Yeah. But
She
there's
could
many
answer.
people, like so many amazing people I would want to have lunch with.
Right? Yeah, I know. It's hard to
Yeah.
pick one. Yeah,
Yeah.
Trey always asks that question, and then I think of a different answer for myself every episode.
Yeah, because every person has something different they can bring to you. Like, especially, you always learn from other people, and as much as you can give information to people who you work with, they can also give information to you. Either it doesn't have to necessarily be about work; it can be about life or anything. So, I think, yeah, it's really interesting to talk to different people. Yeah.
Hmm. And you said something earlier that I thought was really valuable, and that was that when you were still learning, you said failure is part of the process.
Hmm.
And I thought that was incredible. Not everybody realizes that. Not everybody sees that as actually part of the process. Like failure is more something to be avoided. And of course, we don't always love to fail, but that is how we experiment and learn.
Yeah.
I'm wondering what advice you might give to somebody who is just starting out in embroidery or in costuming. Is there any advice you would give them?
Um, I would say work hard. That's one of the things. There's so many things. Um, it's a bit tricky. Oh, it's. I think just do the best job you can, and if you don't know something, ask. Don't be afraid to ask, because there's still a lot I don't know, because I'm still quite new in the industry anyway. And sometimes I see people doing things. I'm like, oh, why are you doing this? Or how are you doing this? Or how would you do something like this? There's no problem with asking questions. And I think sometimes, oh, I definitely remember the first job I did after uni, talking to other people from a different department who have been in the industry for such a long time is really scary. um, at least it feels scary. It is
Hmm.
not, because often everyone is super nice and always willing to help. Um, so don't be afraid to ask people questions, and talk to people.
That's very good advice.
Yeah.
Yeah. We're all just people
Yeah.
anyway, so yeah.
Yeah.
That's wonderful. I love that you have been bold enough to ask those questions uh, and be curious to learn and to be open minded enough to continue learning. I think that's really great. So,
Yeah,
and I
you never stop learning. No matter how old
right,
you are, there different techniques come out or different ways of doing things. Like, you're never too old to learn. So, um, it's really important to, yeah, to stay open-minded and be accepting of advice or other ways of doing things.
absolutely, absolutely.
Yeah.
So, for our audience who want to maybe follow you and support you and watch your journey, where can they go to take a look at more of what you do?
So I think my Instagram is the best place, or my website. But yeah, I would say my Instagram. Uh, so for the people watching, you can see my name, and then so it's Twan Lentjes Creations, is my handle. Uh, Sorry, it's a bit complicated.
That's okay.
um,
And that's TwanLentjes Creations
yeah,
on Instagram. And you can look at his website because it's awesome. You have done such a great, I don't know if you built it or not, but your website is
yeah.
really cool.
I mean, I use WordPress, so it's slightly
Okay.
easier.
Yeah, it looks fabulous. And you
Thank
get a
you.
really great inside look at just some of your projects and a little bit about you. It's really great.
Yeah, I haven't
So,
updated it in a while, but. There's not too much to update anyway at the moment. So I see there's what about if you could make a costume for anyone? Oh,
Oh
make a
yeah.
costume for anyone. Oof. So the Truth Found said, "What about if you could make a costume for anyone? Who would you like to work with?" Oof. um, Gosh, I really don't know.
Would you ever
Uh,
want to be the costume director or costume designer for a major production? Like you are the head of costuming?
I mean, maybe in like quite a few years' time, but at the moment, I would say no,
Okay.
because I don't know enough.
Okay.
I, I'm not very good at drawing, although you can employ people to draw things for you. But I find sometimes it's hard for me to have what I have in my mind or what I envision to put that onto paper or explain it to someone. So I don't know if I would be good enough.
Okay. I was just curious.
um,
That was just
yeah,
adding to that. Because if you
yeah,
couldn't
I'm
answer
not
that,
really
maybe.
sure. I think maybe like she's dead now, but like for example, the Queen from the UK or
Oh, yeah.
even the Dutch Queen Maxima, like she has an amazing fashion style, but to make like the most amazing ball gown, sparkly. I love a bit of sparkle. Um, yeah, maybe something like that.
That would be amazing.
Yeah,
Yeah.
but
Well, I hope
I
you
don't
get
know
to
this.
for someone one day. That would be fabulous.
Yeah, who knows? You never know where life brings you.
Right. That's right. You never
Yeah,
know what's next.
no.
Well, I want to say thank you for joining us today. This has been so great. We could probably talk for more hours, but unfortunately we don't have more hours today. But it was so
Uh,
nice to connect with you and find out more about your journey.
Thank you so much for having me as well. It's been really nice.
Yeah. Real quick before we go, Amber Rose in the chat said, "Love
Yeah.
that he has made swatches for others and himself. Perhaps he would recommend keeping a log or diary of materials and threads to reference later on upcoming projects when being stuck." Is that something you do?
So, embroidery wise, yes, because the system keeps track of all the thread colors and everything,
Oh,
so I don't really have to write it down. I can just print
nice.
it up. So that's very easy, as long as I make sure I update it to the correct information. Um, as far for fabrics, like for film, there's people who keep log of everything, so I don't have to do that. Like um, in theater as well, there are these things called Bibles. So they create a costume Bible, and they keep all the information where they got the products from. So the supplier, the cost, the meterage they got, like everything will be in that Bible. Um, so whenever they revive a show, they can go back to the Bible and see if it's still available from the same supplier. So yeah, it's not my job, but it's someone else's job to do exactly that.
Right. Well, at least it's on file, so
Yeah,
that's,
for the
yeah,
embroidery is in the system. Yeah,
good, good. Well, thank you again for joining us today. Don't forget to go follow Twan on check out his website. Go follow him on Instagram. Watch all the videos, and definitely go watch Wicked because it's an amazing show, and you won't regret that.
no.
And thank you to our audience for tuning in today. You can find us on social media as well under The Modern Romantic on most social media platforms. This has been great. Have a great day, everybody. Bye.
Bye.